You are standing in a forest clearing outside Moscow in November. The air is so cold that each exhale hangs in front of your face like a small ghost before the wind takes it. You are wearing a uniform you have not yet earned the right to understand. Cornflower blue shoulder boards with the letters IOA stamped into metal. Государственной безопасности. Committee for State Security. There are 41 other men standing in this clearing. None of you are speaking. An instructor in a long gray coat walks the line examining each face the way a surgeon examines an X-ray, looking not at the surface, but at the structures beneath it. He stops in front of you. He asks a question that sounds philosophical but is actually diagnostic. He asks whether you believe the Soviet state has the right to eliminate an individual human being if that individual threatens the survival of the collective. You say yes because you were taught to say yes before you were taught to tie your shoes. He nods. He moves on. You do not know yet what you've been selected for. You do not know that the unit you are about to enter has existed under different names since 1936. The Directorate of Special Tasks, Spets Bureau Number 1. The 13th Department, Department V. The names change every decade because the operations they conduct are so extreme that each iteration must be officially dissolved and rebuilt under a new designation so that the Politburo can maintain the fiction that the previous version never existed. You are entering the darkest division of the most powerful intelligence agency on Earth. The KGB employed over 500,000 active personnel at its height. You will belong to a unit so small and so classified that fewer than 200 people in the entire Soviet Union know its current operational mandate. This is your life at every rank. Level 1, Junior Lieutenant, Let's Lieutenant. One small star on a single cornflower blue stripe. You are assigned not to a field posting, but to a school. The 401 School in Okhta, Leningrad. A facility surrounded by birch trees and wire fencing that appears on no municipal directory and receives no mail through normal postal channels. Your curriculum is not what you expected. You expected weapons training and combat scenarios. Instead, you receive an education in invisibility. The first discipline is called Konspiratia, operational tradecraft. The art of existing in a society without leaving evidence that you exist. You practice dry cleaning. That is their term for surveillance detection. You walk the streets of Moscow for hours carrying a newspaper and a shopping bag, and you must identify every person following you. There will be 3, sometimes 4. They are officers from the 7th Directorate whose entire career is built around watching people, and your job is to find them and lose them without ever indicating that you know they are there. You fail the first 11 times. On the 12th attempt, you successfully identify all 4 surveillance officers and shape them using a route through the Moscow metro system that took you 9 hours to plan and 42 minutes to execute. Your instructor says nothing. He makes a mark in a file and moves on to the next lesson. You learn dead drops, how to select a location, a crack in a specific wall, a magnetic container placed beneath a park bench, a chalk mark on a lamppost that signals an agent to retrieve a package without either of you ever occupying the same space at the same time. You practice cipher communication until the encryption tables feel more natural than your own handwriting. You memorize sections of the wanted list, a classified document distributed to every KGB station worldwide containing the descriptions, aliases, family locations, and photographs of every defector and enemy of the state marked for observation or liquidation. You study these faces until you could recognize them at a distance in a crowded airport. Some of these people will become your assignments. You do not know which ones yet. You go home each night to a shared apartment near the school. You eat black bread and sausage and drink tea from a glass with a metal holder, and you write reports about every interaction you had during the day, because at this rank, your entire existence is documentation. You are building the administrative reflexes that will later allow you to manage operations where a single undocumented detail can compromise a network that took 15 years to construct. Level 2, Lieutenant. Lieutenant, 2 stars horizontal on a single stripe. Your training shifts from the theoretical to the applied. You are transferred to a facility you are not permitted to name, located in a forest outside Moscow, behind a fence you are not permitted to photograph. This is where you learn what the 13th Department actually does. Mokroe delo, wet work. The term comes from the blood. Your instructors are men who have conducted these operations personally. One of them was part of the team that eliminated Stepan Bandera in Munich in 1959 using a specially designed cyanide spray gun that fired a mist of hydrocyanic acid directly into the target's face from a distance of 18 inches. The mist induced cardiac arrest within 90 seconds. The autopsy concluded natural causes. No bullet, no blade. No forensic evidence that any weapon was ever discharged. The weapon was developed in Laboratory 1, a subdivision of the KGB's technical department that specializes exclusively in poisons, drugs, and chemical agents designed to kill in ways that mimic organic medical events. You are introduced to the arsenal. You handle the cyanide device yourself under controlled conditions. It is smaller than you imagined. It fits inside a rolled newspaper. You train with the cigarette case gun, a miniature multi-barrel firearm concealed inside a metal case that looks identical to the one your father kept in his coat pocket. It fires at point-blank range. You train with suppressed pistols designed for what the instructors call close work. You are also trained in the products of Laboratory 12, explosives disguised as everyday objects, strychnine-laced chocolates, poison bottles of alcohol. You study each method not as an abstraction, but as a tool to be selected based on the specific requirements of the operation. Some targets must appear to have died naturally. Some must appear to have been killed by a third party. Some must simply disappear. Each outcome requires a different instrument and a different level of forensic cleanliness. You are learning to kill with the precision of a locksmith, selecting the right tool for the right mechanism. You do not discuss this training with anyone outside the facility. You do not discuss it with your wife. You return home each evening and eat dinner across from a woman who asks about your day, and you describe a fabricated office routine with such practiced fluency that the lie no longer requires conscious effort. It has become automatic. You are already living two lives. You have not yet been deployed. The real fracture has not yet begun. Level 3, Senior Lieutenant. Starship Lieutenant. 3 stars arranged in a triangle on a single stripe. You are now assigned to operational support for active missions. You serve as a technical assistant to a controller, the officer who manages agents in the field from a position of distance and deniability. Your controller is a colonel who has been running operations in Western Europe for 22 years. He has never personally conducted a liquidation. He has authorized 14. The distinction between conducting and authorizing is the entire architecture of the darkest divisions. The people who plan never touch the weapon. The people who touch the weapon never know the full plan. You exist in the space between them. You prepare the technical packages. You verify that the chemical agents have been stored at the correct temperature. You test the mechanical function of disguised firearms in a basement workshop that smells like gun oil and solvent. You deliver sealed containers to dead drop locations that will be serviced by operatives you have never met and will never meet. Your fingerprints are never on anything. Your name appears in no operational file. You are a ghost servicing ghosts. You also begin training for Western deployment at the Yuri Andropov Red Banner Institute, previously known as School 101. The facility is hidden in the woods outside Moscow, behind a security perimeter that includes multiple fencing layers and electronic detection systems. The curriculum is 2 years of total immersion. You are assigned a target language, perhaps English, perhaps German, perhaps French. You live in an environment where only that language is spoken. Your instructors are officers who spent decades abroad undercover, and who have internalized the mannerisms, humor, body language, and cultural assumptions of their target nations so completely that meeting them in their cover personas, you would never detect a trace of Russia. They teach you to eat the way an Englishman eats, to gesture the way a Frenchman gestures, to complain about weather the way an American complains about weather. Every micro-behavior is rehearsed until it replaces your authentic reflexes. You are also immunized against the West. Constant lectures on Marxist-Leninist theory are designed not to educate but to inoculate. The instructors know that when you arrive in London or Bonn or Washington, you will be surrounded by consumer goods and personal freedoms that do not exist in the Soviet Union. The ideology sessions are a vaccine against the infection of wanting what the enemy has. Level 4, Captain. Capitan. 4 stars arranged 2 and 2 on a single stripe. You are a field operator now. Your first foreign posting is not in the West. It is in a socialist allied country where the consequences of failure are manageable and the local security services cooperate with Moscow automatically. You run small agent networks. You recruit low-level sources in foreign embassies. You practice operational tradecraft in an environment that is hostile enough to be educational, but not hostile enough to be fatal. You learn the rhythm of case officer work, the development of a target over months of patient social contact, the assessment of motivation. Does this person need money? Does this person resent their government? Does this person crave importance? You learn to become whatever the target needs you to be. A sympathetic listener, a generous friend, a fellow traveler who shares their political disillusionment. You file intelligence reports that travel through encrypted channels back to the center of Moscow. You never learn what happens to the information. You send it upward, and the upward consumes it, and occasionally a directive comes back down that tells you to redirect your efforts or increase contact with a specific target or terminate a relationship that has been deemed unproductive. You are a sensor. The brain is somewhere else. Level 5. The illegal. This is not a rank. It is a transformation. You are selected for Directorate S, the most revered and most secretive subdivision within the entire First Chief Directorate. Directorate S manages the illegals program. Unlike legal officers who operate under diplomatic cover and carry Soviet passports and work from embassy residencies, an illegal assumes the identity of a foreign citizen and lives in the target country for years, sometimes decades. Your Russian identity ceases to exist. Your name, your biography, your family history, your education, your employment record. Everything is replaced by a legend so meticulously constructed that it will survive investigation by the most capable counterintelligence services in the Western world. The legend takes years to build. You study in a konspirativnaya kvartira, a safe house in Moscow, where specialists erase your accent syllable by syllable and replace it with the speech patterns of a Canadian engineer or a Belgian businessman or a Brazilian academic. You memorize a childhood you never lived in a city you have never visited. You learn the names of teachers you never had, the layout of a school you never attended, the taste of meals your fictional mother supposedly cooked every Sunday. Then you are deployed. You enter the target country using a passport that is genuine. Not forged. Genuine. Obtained through the identity of a dead person whose records were acquired by the KGB to one of its networks. You rent an apartment. You get a job. You pay taxes. You make friends. You date. Perhaps you marry. Perhaps you have children. Your children will not know who you are. They will grow up speaking a language that is not yours, in a country that is not yours, believing a biography that was written in a basement in Moscow. You will watch them take their first steps and say their first words, and you will carry the knowledge that everything surrounding them is a construction and you're the architect and the prisoner of that construction. Simultaneously, your handler contacts you through methods so indirect that a surveillance team monitoring your every movement would see nothing. A chalk mark on a wall. A specific book placed in a specific position in a public library window. A radio transmission broadcast at a frequency that sounds like static to anyone without the correct equipment. You collect intelligence for years. You report on the internal politics of NATO. You identify recruitment targets among government officials and defense industry engineers. You prepare stay-behind networks that will activate if war breaks out. These networks are your primary strategic function. If the Soviet Union goes to war with NATO, you are the advance force already behind enemy lines. You have been living behind enemy lines for 12 years. Your children call you dad in a language you learned from a tape recorder. You sit at dinner and smile and ask about homework, and you are the loneliest human being on the continent. Level 6, Major. 1 large star on 2 parallel strikes. You have returned to Moscow. Your illegal deployment lasted 9 years. The reintegration is more difficult than the deployment itself because you must now unbecome the person you spent nearly a decade becoming. You speak Russian with a faint accent that your colleagues notice and politely do not mention. Your dietary preferences have shifted. You reach for foods that do not exist in Moscow grocery stores. You catch yourself thinking in English. The center assigns you to a management position within Directorate S. You are now a handler. You manage illegals still deployed in the field. You are their lifeline to Moscow. You approve their intelligence submissions. You authorize their expenditures. You assess their psychological stability through the limited communication channels available. When an illegal shows signs of fracturing, you make the determination whether to extract them or push them further. This calculation is never purely operational. It is moral in a way that the service does not acknowledge, because acknowledging morality would require questioning the premise upon which the entire program is built. You also oversee target packages for Department V, infrastructure sabotage. You study the blueprints of Western power stations, oil pipelines, telecommunications hubs, and satellite ground facilities. Operation Typhoon is on your desk. A 1970 plan to sabotage a Japanese satellite ground station. The dossier contains the vulnerabilities of the water supply system, the computer rooms, the antenna arrays. Multiple attack vectors are mapped. Explosives, small arms, chemical contamination. Your job is to ensure these packages are current and executable at 48 hours notice. If the special period begins, the period immediately preceding open war with NATO, your target packages become operational orders, and teams you have never met will execute them using weapons and explosives buried in caches across Western Europe, in Switzerland, in Belgium, in locations you have memorized and will never visit. Level 7, Lieutenant Colonel, Podpolkovnik. 2 stars on 2 stripes. You command a subdirectorate. Your area of responsibility might be Western Europe or North America, or the technical operations that support both. You travel to residentures under diplomatic cover to inspect stations and evaluate personnel. You sit in secure rooms inside Soviet embassies and review the performance of officers who are operating under pressures you understand intimately because you lived under those same pressures for 9 years in a country that believed you were someone else. You attend briefings at the center where the latest intelligence is synthesized into assessments that travel to the Politburo. You learn that the decisions made at your level frequently bear no relationship to the intelligence you provide. The Politburo sees what it wants to see. Operation Arweon consumes the organization during the early 1980s. The leadership has become convinced that the United States is preparing a nuclear first strike. You are ordered to instruct every residentura worldwide to monitor indicators. The number of illuminated windows in government buildings at night, the frequency of blood drives at military hospitals, the movement patterns of senior officials. You relay these instructions knowing that the methodology is absurd. Counting lit windows is not intelligence. It is paranoia codified into procedure. But you relay the instructions because the organization does not distinguish between paranoia and caution, and the penalty for questioning either is a career-ending notation in your personnel file. Level 8, Colonel, Polkovnik. 3 stars in a triangle on 2 stripes. You are the resident of a major Western capital. You command the entire KGB station operating from within the Soviet embassy. Dozens of officers, hundreds of agents. Your operational budget is managed through the shadow economy, a network of front companies and illicit financial channels that bypass Western sanctions and import critical military technology into the Soviet Union. You move money through banks in neutral countries. You procure microelectronics from companies that do not know their products are destined for Soviet weapons systems. You manage this commercial espionage alongside your intelligence operations and your active measures campaigns, the clandestine programs designed to influence Western public opinion, discredit NATO, and amplify social divisions within target democracies. You plant stories in sympathetic newspapers. You fund front organizations that advocate for nuclear disarmament, while the Soviet Union continues expanding its arsenal. You recruit journalists and academics and politicians through a combination of ideological sympathy and financial incentive and blackmail. You also manage the darkest operations. A defector has been located in your city. His name has been on the wanted list for 6 years. Moscow wants him neutralized. You coordinate with the center to assemble a team. You select the method, you authorize the timeline, you ensure that the operation leaves no forensic evidence connecting the act to the Soviet Union. The defector dies of an apparent heart attack in his apartment. The local coroner finds nothing unusual. The case is closed within a week. You file your report through encrypted channels and the center responds with a single word. You carry that word and that death inside a compartment of your mind that has been specifically constructed to hold such things without allowing them to contaminate the compartments where you function as a husband and a father. And a man who attends embassy dinners and discusses literature with diplomats who have no idea what you authorized that morning. You shop at the Beryozka. This is the system that keeps you loyal. Beryozka stores are exclusive outlets that sell Western goods unavailable anywhere else in the Soviet Union. Japanese stereos, Belgian denim, French perfume, imported tobacco. Your salary is paid partly in foreign currency rubles. Certificates that function as an elite currency within a society where the regular economy cannot provide basic consumer goods without years-long waiting lists. You drive a Volga sedan that you purchased without queuing. Your apartment in Moscow is larger than anything available to a civilian family of equivalent size. Your children attend the best schools. Your wife shops at stores that 8,000 privileged citizens in the entire capital have access to. This is capitalism behind a birch tree. The party provides these privileges deliberately because a man who lives better than his neighbors is a man who has something to lose, and a man who has something to lose does not defect. Level 9, Major General. 1 large embroidered star on braided gold shoulder boards. Cornflower blue piping. You command an entire directorate, perhaps Directorate S itself. Perhaps Directorate T, Scientific and Technical Intelligence. Perhaps the operational arm of Department V before its functions were absorbed into other structures. You attend meetings with the chairman of the KGB, you brief the Politburo on matters of strategic intelligence. Your uniform is heavier now, not physically, institutionally. The decisions you make affect the trajectory of Soviet foreign policy. You authorize operations that could trigger diplomatic crises, or worse. You manage the Ninth Directorate's coordination with your operational divisions when the personal security of the General Secretary intersects with foreign intelligence concerns. The Ninth Directorate is a 40,000-man force dedicated to protecting the Kremlin leadership. They manage the VIP subway system beneath Moscow, the secure evacuation routes designed for nuclear war, the special kitchens that test every meal served to the Politburo for poison. The irony is not lost on you. The same organization that poisons its enemies maintains a dedicated department to ensure its leaders are never poisoned. You are also surveilled. Every officer, regardless of rank, is subject to Narushka, physical surveillance conducted by the 7th Directorate. Your telephone is monitored. Your movements are tracked. Your wife's conversations with her friends are recorded and reviewed by officers from the 2nd Chief Directorate who are looking for signs of ideological contamination, behavioral deviation, or the earliest indicators of potential defection. The system watches itself with the same intensity it watches the enemy. The term is prophylactica, prevention. If you express a thought that deviates from the approved ideological framework, you will receive a preventive warning. The warning is polite. The implication behind it is not. You have delivered these warnings to subordinates. Now you live under the possibility of receiving one yourself. Power in the KGB does not insulate you from suspicion. It amplifies the suspicion because the higher you climb, the more secrets you carry, and the more valuable those secrets become to the adversary. Level 10. Colonel General. 3 large stars on braided gold boards. You are the head of the 1st Chief Directorate or the 1st Deputy Chairman of the KGB itself. You sit in a room in the center on Lubyanka Square, the building that has been the administrative heart of Soviet state security since the Cheka occupied it in 1917. The walls of this building have absorbed more fear than any structure in Moscow. Prisoners were interrogated in the basement. Executions were conducted in the courtyard. The building has been renovated since then, but the institutional memory has not. You manage the global intelligence apparatus. Every residentura on Earth reports through your authority. Every illegal deployed in every Western nation operates under your strategic direction. Every active measure, every sabotage plan, every liquidation order passes through a chain of command that terminates at your desk. You have watched the Soviet Union begin to die. The economy is failing. The shelves in ordinary stores are bare. The Berezovka system that sustained your loyalty now stands as evidence of the very inequality the party was supposed to eliminate. You know the empire is unsustainable because you have access to intelligence that tells you what the Politburo refuses to hear. Your own officers' reports from Western postings describe economies of abundance that make the Soviet system look medieval by comparison. You suppress these reports, not because you disagree with them, but because delivering them upward would accomplish nothing except your removal and replacement by someone willing to deliver the comfortable fictions the leadership prefers. The dissolution comes in 1991. The KGB is formally dismantled. But dismantled is a word that requires examination. The 1st Chief Directorate becomes the SVR. The domestic security functions become the FSB. The illegals program continues under new management. The target packages for Western infrastructure remain in files that were transferred, not destroyed. The caches buried in NATO territory were never recovered because no one issued the order to dig them up. The officers who learned to kill with cyanide mist and recruit with psychological precision and live for decades under names that did not belong to them did not retire to dakas and forget what they knew. They became consultants and advisors and trainers for a new generation that inherited every technique and every doctrine and every institutional instinct that the darkest divisions spent 50 years perfecting. Somewhere in Moscow right now, a young person is sitting in the lecture hall at MGIMO, the Moscow State Institute of International Relations. They are studying languages and diplomacy and international relations. A professor has noticed something in their work. Not brilliance, something more specific, a tolerance for ambiguity, a comfort with deception that most people develop only through practice. But this student seems to possess natively. A note is made. A name is passed through a channel that has functioned continuously since the 1950s, despite every reorganization and every dissolution and every assurance that the old methods have been abandoned. A conversation will happen. In a cafe, perhaps, or a park, or a quiet office with no nameplate on the door. Questions will be asked about loyalty and loneliness, and whether the young person believes the state has the right to eliminate an individual for the survival of the collective. The answer has been rehearsed since childhood. The forest clearing outside Moscow still exists. The cornflower blue shoulder boards are manufactured in the same factory. The laboratories have been modernized, but the chemistry is unchanged. The swimming pool is still closed for maintenance. It has been closed for decades. The work behind it has never stopped. The sword has been reforged. The shield has been repainted. The Darkest Division has a new name now. It always gets a new name. The mission remains exactly the same.